Story 1. The Abandoned Campsite. It was late July in northern Michigan, the kind of summer night where the sky felt endless and the woods hummed with crickets. My friend Caleb and I had gone on a short road trip to camp near Lake Superior. We weren't hardcore outdoorsmen, but we loved the idea of escaping the city, cracking open a few beers, and maybe sleeping under the stars for once in our lives. The campsite we found wasn't official. It wasn't in any park brochure. Caleb swore he'd read about it on some hiking forum. Hidden, quiet, no fees. That alone convinced me. We drove down a long dirt road, the trees getting denser the deeper we went. By the time we reached the so-called camping spot, I realized we hadn't passed another car in nearly 30 minutes. The place was eerie. Sure, the clearing by the trees looked usable enough. Someone had even left a fire ring made of stones, half filled with ashes. But there were little signs that unsettled me. An old tent pole sticking out of the ground, a broken lantern rusting in the grass, and, most disturbing of all, a torn sleeping bag shoved halfway under a log, as if someone had tried to hide it. Caleb laughed it off, saying people always leave junk behind. He set up his tent while I walked down to the lake. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the last orange glow of the sunset. Beautiful, but unnervingly quiet. No fish splashing, no loons calling, just silence. That night, after a fire and a couple beers, we turned in. The forest around us was pitch black. Around 1 a.m., I woke up to footsteps. At first I thought it was Caleb, but when I whispered his name, I heard his snores. The footsteps circled our tent slowly, crunching leaves, breaking twigs. I froze. Then came the breathing. Heavy, wet. It stopped inches from the thin fabric separating us. I clutched the knife I'd brought and didn't move. After a few minutes, the footsteps faded into the woods. I waited until dawn before I dared unzip the tent. Around the fire ring, fresh boot prints were stamped into the dirt. Not ours, not Caleb's. Someone had been watching us. We packed up and left immediately. Later, I tried finding that forum post Caleb had mentioned. It didn't exist. No one online had ever heard of an abandoned campsite by that lake. I still wonder whose tent pole and sleeping bag those were, and if that person ever left. Story 2. The Night Hiker. When I was 19, I worked as a counselor at a summer camp in upstate New York. Most of the time it was fun. Teaching kids how to canoe, sitting around campfires, telling ghost stories. But there's one night I'll never forget. The counselors had a tradition called the Midnight Hike. Once every summer, after the campers were asleep, we'd take flashlights and hike a trail that wound deep into the forest. It was meant to be harmless fun, just something to give us a scare before we returned to the safety of our cabins. That year, it was my turn to lead. I had 6 other counselors with me, all joking nervously as we set off. The woods felt alive, the trees creaking, the ground damp from an earlier rain. We walked single file, beams of light bouncing off the underbrush. About half an hour in, we reached the old wooden bridge. It crossed a narrow ravine, and every counselor knew the story. Years ago, a man had supposedly gone missing while hiking there at night. They found his backpack in the middle of the bridge, but no sign of him. Some people claimed he fell. Others said something dragged him off the path. Of course, we told that story every year. Usually it got laughs. But that night, the air felt different. The forest was so quiet that every breath sounded too loud. As we stepped onto the bridge, I heard it. Footsteps behind us. I turned, expecting another counselor, but everyone was already ahead of me. The footsteps stopped when I aimed my flashlight back. Nothing but trees. We hurried across, suddenly eager to be done. But on the return hike, the feeling of being followed grew unbearable. More than once, I caught glimpses of something pale between the trees. A figure, watching. By the time we got back, everyone was shaken. One of the counselors, Amy, was in tears. She swore she'd seen a man standing in the woods, his clothes dripping as if soaked through. The next morning, I mentioned it to the camp director, half laughing, trying to play it off. He didn't laugh. He just looked at me for a long moment and said, "That's why we don't run the midnight hike anymore." But we had run it every year, or so we thought. To this day, I can't explain who or what was following us. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the sound of wet footsteps on dry leaves. Story 3: Screams from the Lake. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, surrounded by farmland and woods. There was a lake on the edge of town, the kind of place teenagers went to hang out during summer nights. Everyone called it Miller's Lake. But behind the laughter and parties, the lake had a darker reputation. When I was a kid, my mom always warned me not to swim there. She said people had drowned, teenagers sneaking out, drunk drivers, even a fisherman who supposedly vanished without a trace. I thought it was just small-town superstition, until one night when I was 17. My best friend Jake convinced me to drive out there with a group. It was hot, humid, and we were bored. We parked near the shore, music blasting from someone's truck. A few of us jumped in the water, splashing around, laughing. Around midnight, things quieted down. Most people had gone home. Just me, Jake, and 2 girls were left sitting on the dock, watching the dark water ripple under the moonlight. That's when we heard it. A scream, high-pitched, echoing across the lake. At first we thought it was a prank, someone trying to scare us. But it didn't stop. It rose and fell, like someone fighting for air, like someone drowning. Jake wanted to leave, but I couldn't move. I just kept staring out across the black water, waiting to see something. And I did. There was a figure in the lake, not swimming, standing, waist deep, facing us. We couldn't see details, but it was human-shaped. Too far from shore, too still. Then, it disappeared. No splash, no ripple. Just gone. We bolted to the truck, peeling out of there as fast as we could. Later, when I told my mom, she went pale. She said when she was a teenager, her cousin had drowned in that lake. Everyone said it was an accident, but she swore she'd heard him screaming for help that night too. I never went back. Even now, years later, sometimes on humid summer nights, I dream of that scream,